Welcome to the Adventures of the Monad. We continue our discussion of the colors to be found in a person's emotional and mental envelopes and their effects based on their personality type. We start with the practical person, who tends to have a logical and methodical approach to things. They typically have a structured and organized way of thinking, with less emotion and imagination compared to someone who is more intuitive. As a result, they may have less passion and creativity, but are also less likely to make mistakes. Their work is usually thorough and well executed. It should also be noted that having a scientific and organized mindset clearly impacts how the colors are arranged in the emotional aura. They tend to form distinct bands, and the boundaries between them become more defined. The intuitive person tends to have a more prominent presence of blue in their mental canvas. But colors are usually ambiguous, and the overall mental state is unorganized. This type of person often experiences more hardship compared to someone with a steadier temperament. But sometimes this suffering enables them to make quick progress. In the ideal individual, passion, enthusiasm, stability, and consistency are important. It simply depends on which is needed first. Aside from the previously mentioned qualities represented by colors in the mental envelope, there are other qualities like courage, dignity, cheerfulness, and thoughtfulness that are indicated more by form than by color. These qualities are broadly indicated by differences in the structure of the mental envelope or by changes in its surface. Within the various rings or zones of color already described, there are usually clearly marked striations. Many aspects of a person's character can be assessed by examining these striations. For instance, possessing a strong will brings about more clearly defined lines in the mental envelope. The striations and radiations are steady, firm, and distinguishable. Conversely, this firmness and strength of lines would be absent in the case of a weak and indecisive individual. The lines separating different qualities would be unclear, and the striations would be small, weak, and wavy. Courage is demonstrated by strong and prominently marked lines, particularly in the orange band associated with pride, as well as by the serene, unwavering presence of colors indicating higher qualities. When fear overwhelms a person, all the colors become dim and are overpowered by a vivid gray mist. The distinct lines are lost in a quivering mass of pulsating jelly, signifying the temporary loss of control and guidance over one's faculties. Dignity also manifests primarily in the same part of the mental envelope as courage, but with a composed steadiness and confidence that differs from the lines of courage. The presence of truthfulness and accuracy is reflected in the consistent patterns in the mental envelope focused on concrete forms and in the clarity and correctness of the images that appear there. Loyalty is evident through heightened affection and devotion, and by the continual formation of images of the person to whom the loyalty is directed. In many cases, a strong and enduring image of the object of those feelings is created and remains in the thinker's aura. When the thinker's thoughts turned to the loved one, the force exerted strengthens the pre-existing image rather than forming a new one. Joy is indicated by a general brightening and radiance of the mental and emotional bodies, and a distinctive rippling of the envelope surface. Cheerfulness is often expressed through a modified, bubbling form of energy and in a steady serenity that is pleasing to witness. Surprise, on the other hand, can be recognized by a sharp mental reaction accompanied by an increasing warmth in feelings or affection in the surprise if it is a pleasant one. Conversely, if the surprise is unpleasant, it can lead to a change in color, often involving the display of brown and gray in the lower parts of one's consciousness. This typical reaction affects both the emotional and physical bodies. It can cause uncomfortable sensations, impacting the solar plexus, resulting in a sinking feeling and sickness, or the heart center, potentially causing palpitations, or even more serious consequences for those with weak hearts. Therefore, a sudden surprise may occasionally be fatal for individuals with underlying health issues. Or is similar to wonder, but it includes a profound change in the part of the mind related to devotion. This usually expands under this influence and its patterns become more distinct. Mystical thought and the presence of psychic abilities are represented by colors that have no equivalent on the physical plane. When a person focuses their thoughts strongly on specific channels in their mind, the mental envelope vibrates more rapidly and becomes brighter in color. The part of the mental envelope corresponding to that thought usually expands temporarily, disturbing the overall symmetry of the mind's shape for a while. It is common for certain areas of the mental envelope to become enlarged in response to increased focus and thought on a particular subject. For instance, when someone begins to study a scientific field, the part of the brain associated with that subject may bulge temporarily. If the person's interest in the subject remains constant, the bulge will eventually recede, although the area will still be more pronounced than before. However, if the individual's interest and focus on the scientific subject continues to grow, the bulge will persist and the area will remain prominent. Over-specialization in a subject area may lead to imbalanced mental development, with some parts becoming overly developed while others remain underdeveloped. It is important to seek a well-rounded and proportionate mental development. This requires careful self-analysis and a clear direction towards balanced growth, which will be further explored in a later presentation. We know from previous discussions that just as there is constant movement of matter in the mental envelope, there is also constant movement in the emotional aspect for a person. When there is a sudden emotion, it's like a strong storm stirring all the matter around, causing colors to mix. However, with time, the matter settles back into its usual zones. The particles then continue to move within their zones with little movement between zones. This movement within zones is healthy. In fact, someone without this circulation is like a mental crustacean, unable to grow until they break out of their shell. The more thought devoted to a subject, the more active the matter in the relevant zone becomes. Disturbances of the mental envelope are similar to those in the emotional envelope and are equally disastrous in their effects. For example, suppose a person allows themselves to become greatly worried over a problem, constantly mulling over it without reaching any conclusion. In that case, they create a kind of storm in their mental envelope. It's like creating an irritation from friction, leading to a sore spot in the mental envelope. An argumentative person keeps their mental envelope in a state of perpetual inflammation, and this inflammation can easily flare into an actual sore with the slightest provocation. Until such a person brings balance and common sense to their diseased mental condition, there is no hope of any kind of occult progress. If a person allows their thoughts on a specific subject to become stagnant. That stagnation will be reflected in how they approach that subject. Allowing their thoughts to become fixed and rigid creates a blockage, which appears as a prejudice. It's like a small whirlpool form, trapping the mental matter until it hardens to a kind of obstacle. Until this obstacle is removed or overcome, the person cannot effectively engage with that particular subject and is unable to think rationally about it. This dense blockage hinders the person from seeing clearly and from forming new, reliable opinions about the matter, and also prevents them from expressing clear thoughts about it. Unfortunately, these unhealthy points in the mental framework are also sources of infection. The lack of clarity leads to further deterioration and spread. If one part of the mental framework becomes stagnant, it's likely to affect other areas as well. Therefore, if a person has a bias on one subject, they will probably develop biases on others as well, because the normal flow of mental energy has been obstructed, leading to the habit of being untruthful. Religious bias is the most prevalent and significant, completely hindering any rational thought on the subject. Many people have a hardened and visibly flaw-covered mental framework related to religious matters, making even the most basic understanding of what religion truly is completely impossible for them until a drastic change occurs. Overall, it can be said that among the most developed individuals of the more advanced human races today, the physical body is fully developed and reasonably controlled. The emotional body is also fully developed, but not entirely under perfect control. And the mental body is still evolving and far from being complete. These individuals have a long way to go before their three bodies become completely subservient to the monad. Once this happens, the lower self, persona, will be absorbed into the higher self, causal envelope, and the soul, aka the monad, will be the dominant force in the individual. In such a person, there is no longer conflict between the different bodies. Although not perfect, their various aspects are harmonized to the extent that they have a single purpose. Something to work towards. See you in the next presentation. Thank you.